Okay, welcome back to the How to Be Simply Human podcast. My name is Ami, your host, and I use this space to think about the parts of consciousness, culture, identity, and human behavior that most people either flatten or avoid or evade out of some intention to deny the deeper complexities of life. And that is the world that I live in, the world of nuance, a world of inescapable pain and confusion. And I'm okay with that, but that's why I like to talk to all of you guys, because I think dialogue is the only way I can fathom moving through these ideas. How to Be Simply Human is a podcast about psychological reality, philosophical tension, spiritual and existential inquiry, and the structures underneath what we call ordinary life. If you are here for easy consolation, this probably will not be that. But if you are here for honesty, complexity, and language that will be used to liberate us all from things that usually go unnamed, you're in the right place. I'd like to get into today's topic, which is about ego, control, family power, despair, and the way silence compounds pressure until you can no longer tell whether you are containing yourself or erasing yourself. Here's the deal. I have spent so much time avoiding recording podcast episodes because I have an aversion to revealing myself. And I think all of us have that same fear of exposure. But for me, it's always been an attempt to deny my own messy humanity. I've had this emotional pressure building for days, festering inside of me, and it's not mere sadness or anger, but an accumulated psychic charge. What's been unspoken in my life and my multiple relationships that have taxed me in so many ways, emotionally, physiologically, and otherwise, has now behaved like debt in my life. And generally speaking, the more you postpone expression, the more that this expression itself becomes difficult, or otherwise, in my case, inevitable, which is why we're here now. So the first thing I want to talk about is emotional expression and what led me to the way that I present myself into the world. Most of my life, I operated under this assumption that nothing that I had to say was important enough or valuable enough unless it was audited by some external authority figure. See, I've had an introduction to power dynamics before I really understood what that phrase meant, but it lived in my body. It lived in my cellular structure, in my genome, that is, because I am South Asian and our culture is truly rooted in hierarchical abuses of power. Now, the silence itself and this emotional containment that I've really seen as a pattern in my life ultimately became self-erasure for me. And the way that I see it is that when you are silent for so long, you lose practice of hearing your own voice. Expression is too inundating for you because silence is more comfortable. And whether that is a comfortable familiarity or not is not truly the question. It's rather understanding that a nervous system that has gotten used to submission and surrender can only know that as its reality. And a lot of times, psychology does have words to describe these inexplainable, or seemingly so, concepts of the human experience. Learned helplessness is one of those. So what that is denotatively described as is repeated exposure to uncontrollable stressors that can lead people to stop using options for controlling the situation at hand, even when those options later exist. It's sort of a functional paralysis. Again, your nervous system is learning what is the most expedient resolve. Even if it might not lead to a return in investment, it will get you out of the perceived threat in some way or another. And oftentimes doing that so many times, containing yourself so many times, stifling your own expression so many times, leads you to existing in this existential vacuum of life. It's a practiced alienation, emptiness, futility, and aimlessness of life, because you haven't really taught yourself how to be human in your most expressive state. This is where I've been for so long, and this is what I've been learning to unlearn. And so, for me, the emotional pressure it's my second nature. Might even be my first. And I've spent too much time in my thoughts delineating what emotional expression is valuable enough or, profitable enough to actually be put out into the world. And so then the pressure compounds and I end up staying silent. I don't put out the article that I wanted to post, or I don't make the YouTube video I wanted to share. I don't say the thing that I wanted to say. And whether that is a true intention of mine or rather the coping mechanism of an exhausted nervous system, I think it's safe to say it is the latter. And so here's the deal. I think this paralysis that traps a lot of us is so commonplace. When we live in a world that is dysregulating in its most standard experience, it really is difficult to find the space to sit with your emotions and then be able to articulate them. Silence is safer in that situation. And for someone like me, I'm an abuse survivor, so silence, that was my ticket to remaining alive. So I hold myself with compassion when I realize that I've been holding on to too much. But here's the thing. Pressure and being emotionally paralyzed, it takes a toll in the long run. And it is an architecture that is truly produced and persists because of your environment. But I want to go back a little bit and explain how my emotional architecture was produced in the first place. I think emotional stifling is most definitely structural. A lot of us have our families to blame. And I know for a lot of you guys, you can't even point any fingers at your dear mother or father or whoever raised you, because you've been taught that to question the authority of others is some blasphemous act. This is the wrong place to be, my friend. If you really are not here to question powerful systems, you're not going to have a fun time on this podcast or my corner of the internet, because that's all we do here. Power dynamics is something I've taken an interest in after realizing and being told by many, many medical professionals and therapists of whatnot, of the similar scope and field, that I've been abused for years and years and years, and that forced me to delve deeper into what, produces the responses in these emotionally abusive environments, and abusive in any accounts, because I think every abuse is visceral in its own way, and every abuse eventually becomes physical, because most emotional or psychological forms of abuse end up taking a physical toll on the body anyways. Now, my pain, the way that I describe it, my emotional containment and my fear of being truly exposed in my most vulnerable states, it's structurally produced. And the truth is that I didn't realize how being abused really and truly shaped my internal world. The issue is that I've been raised by family patterns that are truly pathogenic, right? Like, it is a parasitic nature that I've been exposed to from a very young age, known as narcissistic abuse. And that on its own has given me such an intimacy with the human psyche in ways that I would never wish upon anybody. Like, I've realized so truly how evil people are born, and rather how, I mean, I'm not going to be the one to say that evil is inherent or it's innately a state that somebody inhabits, but it is oftentimes a state people choose to remain in, even when they are shown their ugliest colors. So that's to say that I've learned a lot about power consolidation. I've learned about relational access and what people are willing to do to preserve a fallacious sense of harmony in their lives. In many ways, this intimacy, this close contact I've gained with the human psyche has revealed to me how pathetic the existence of the human being is. Like, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, it took us millions of years to get to the point of where we're at. And, I'll give us credit. We've done a lot of cool things in terms of evolving to our current biological state to sustain life. But, I mean, what have we really done? I am terrified of humans and also weirdly proud of us, and still have a deep contempt and disdain for the process of what it is to sustain life as a human being. And for people who are narcissistic, who are abusive in their nature, existence is a matter of, like, mortality. Like, an ego death is always imminent for narcissistic people, and I think they're aware of this, right? So that's why you see a lot of this defensive posturing. And the desire for harmony, or the desire to maintain an image, is often a defense against uncertainty and a defense against the autonomy of others and the possibility that love itself cannot be guaranteed, or anything for that matter. And what I've noticed a lot about abusers is that they are the perfect way to understand what we all as human beings attempt to avoid, which is uncertainty. Uncertainty of outcome, uncertainty of circumstance, uncertainty of relational exchanges. In summation, we're all afraid all the time of the things that we cannot predict or promise. And so I'm so familiar with what it feels like to be somebody else's projection landscape, where you become this malleable image to confirm or deny someone else's existence. That's all I ever really was to my own family, right? An extension of their own name, of their own existence, a way to confirm that what they were was worthy enough to be real and validated. I was never really taught to view myself as an entire human being. And so that explains a lot about my own grappling with low self-esteem and inescapable self-hatred most of my life, because I wasn't taught that I deserved respect, because I wasn't a full human being to begin with. And it's difficult to exist in this family system where you're not 100% human ever. And so that explains why I cannot fathom the human existence at all, because I was never allowed to be human in the first place. And It is why I've developed, in my opinion, such an aversion to the human condition, because I wasn't allowed to express myself authentically or, free of criticism or danger. And I learned that to be human is to be in constant threat, whether that was by observation or by my own treatment by my family or by my culture. It taught me a lot about ego, and it, to this day, has forced me into a deep-seated fear of what a human ego is capable of. And that leads me to my wider critique of the social experience that we all have here on Earth. So I'm not just angry that people have egos, right? I'm just disgusted by the specific forms of ego that require distortion, dominance, and defensive posturing to survive. And that's the only examples I've truly seen. I've seen what the human ego can produce once it is threatened, once it feels insecure enough to attack. And that is a person that I could never force myself to be around. I will accept that they are a human being and that they are imperfect, but I cannot find it in me to look at that person and feel safe around them and what they represent in my own wounded landscape of family abuse I've endured. I'm interested in the human condition because I'm wondering what it would take for all of us to expand beyond our egos. I'm intrigued by the kind of selfhood and autonomous human posturing that is rooted in coherence, right? It's not rooted in relativity or psychological mirroring. And I think that's such an impossible ask, and that's why I find myself so alienated all the time, because I wonder, am I asking too much from a population that has such low standards for integrity and character? I don't know. I haven't met all 7 billion to 8 billion of you guys, so I don't want to get my hopes up. But it's hard to remain so open to the possibility of a greater humankind when all the examples you've been shown are so low caliber. It does make you lose hope. It does lead to that existential vacuum I was describing earlier. And the questions that I end up asking myself is, what is the ego? And what is the problem with a human being that cannot see past who they are? Beyond the topical, right, expressions of what a human being is, whether it's your culture, religion, or the family name you belong to, right? These are all expressions of the ego. So what is that in importance to the human expression? Is it inseparable? Is it really too much for me to ask? And why is it that the most fragile people have the most imperious forms of presenting themselves? It's like an act of domineering. Otherwise, they don't feel safe to be in the world. They have to be subduing somebody in order to feel like they are in the driver's seat. And what does that do for people like me who don't care to be a part of these frivolous matters of life and would rather, surrender to a more simple life on the periphery? Is that isolation, right? Is that depression, or is that simply an exhaustion with how many human beings have succumbed to their lowest states of existence? And oftentimes it is my own nature of being able to see the human psyche with such truth that my contempt for the human condition leads to my contempt to myself. And I begin to distance from my own emotions because I see the humanity in all the ways that I express myself. And if I have seen how dangerous a human being can get, what's to say that I won't become that way? And so I have also, in many ways, accrued a massive amount of trepidation and unease towards me as a human being. And I've engaged with self-alienation, which is described as an estrangement from oneself, and it often does involve emotional distancing. It leads to me building up this immense internal pressure that is demanding to be released in some form of expression, whether it's writing or creation of any kind. But I reject it entirely because I feel like giving in would make me too human and too similar to all those people that have hurt me. And it's led me to a lot of existentialism in my life. I've grappled with finding meaning and commitment to human existence in general because I don't know what the rules are anymore. If defensive posturing is a social norm and operating from ego is the normative standard, then how do I fit into all of that when I deny that very premise? People are so focused on image maintenance as a substitute for relational truth. And I'm interested in deconstruction. So I just find more and more that I'm incompatible with life. And my definition for existence is so outside of what most people consider to be a meaningful human existence that I find myself in an ontological bind. And I'm not merely criticizing bad behavior, I'm just criticizing the entire mode of existence that we've decided is baseline. And so my distress is civilizational. It's not merely personal. I often feel incompetent to be in this world because of how incompatible I feel with it. And it's not truly a reflection of my lack of ability. I've proven to myself time and time again that I overperform in every situation. I've been incessantly told against my own will my entire life of how intelligent I am and how high performing I am, which angers me, to be truthful, because it reminds me more and more that my refusal to partake in life is not due to my own inability. It's due to my denial of adapting to a world that rewards defendedness, social performance, and egoic compromise. So I don't feel behind because I lack mind or mental prowess. I feel behind because my standards for integrity clash with the structures that I'm expected to survive inside. Oftentimes, my own functional capacity is debilitated. I have several very life-threatening chronic illnesses and neurological incapacities. However, I don't feel as though I would describe myself as chronically incapacitated. I just reject the terms of functioning that is offered to me, because when you exist on a totally different framework of life, as many people with chronic illness do, your metric for life itself changes. And I've actually been able to see myself outside of the machinery of the human psychology because I've been asked to operate outside of it by my own bodily limitations. The issue is that when I am found to be at odds with everything that most people stand for, it leads to my own constant state of distress with who I am and who I can ever be in this world. Am I ever meant to belong to this interconnected community of people that accept life on the premises that they inherited? Because I don't agree with most of you guys. And if you're listening to this, maybe I do agree with you. Maybe we do connect. But oftentimes I don't. And I can still find a kinship with most people, but I don't think most people could understand me, and that's the problem. I was raised to be exceptionally porous and flexible to the needs of others, and so I am adaptable. I've been adapting my whole life, and that's led me to live in the chronic allostatic overload, which is basically just a clinical term to describe being in a chronic stress state, which leads to your own physiology becoming so burdened that you become chronically ill. I don't know where I would go with this feeling of my own alienation. And that's what has led to a lot of my own philosophical inquiry. I observe and I speak with people as a means of trying to understand why people are so attached to life in the way that they are, because I don't get it. And so I try to analyze and I learn and I treat people like they're a part of my own case study to prove that I should continue existing here. And that's why, for me, this is a very sensitive topic, but suicide has not been a taboo subject for me. I've been suicidal for most of my life. I think living in an existential vacuum gives you a close relationship with what it means to not participate in life. And in many ways, that is what death is, right? It's ceasing a relationship with active life as we know it. And suicidal ideation, it's not something I fear anymore. It's just something that patters in the back of my mind. I think it's a unconventional posture I have towards suicidal thoughts because I don't see it as taboo. I don't see despair as something that should be unspeakable. I'm interested to know why society defends life when it is unsustainable. I mean, that gets me to talking about the immense sociopolitical turmoil and how the systems of power in this world do not care for the individual. So how can we penalize somebody for choosing to end their life when the conditions that they were given to live that life were insufferable to begin with? And we've created a society that cannot tolerate direct speech about not wanting to exist. I'm so intrigued by why endless suffering is normalized. And this entire moral theater we've designed around survival. What is actually being protected when despair becomes unsayable? I mean, is the panic about truly caring about the state of an individual's internal world, or is it about preserving a social script? Because I've seen how that ends up. I know what this incessant need for harmony actually does to a person. That's what my entire upbringing was, right? I didn't know myself beyond being a character in this odd, theatrical performance to maintain an illusory representation of familial harmony and care and love, when behind the scenes, none of that was actually happening at all. It's a facade. And I care more about being real than some fictitious, elaborated understanding of somebody else's experience. I want to talk about the things that upset you to the point of wanting to hit the self-destruct button, because that tells me what needs to be repaired. And so you can tell I'm not truly a nihilistic person. I'm interested in reform and a reparational way of approaching life. But everything I've been offered up until this point has only ever teetered up to the edge of restoration and readmitting me into a performative act of life. And I'm not interested in the theatrics of it all. A lot of times, we're not allowing ourselves to be miserable without giving it an aesthetic architecture to live inside. You know, I remember when I first started my TikTok accounts, I used to make videos about me during these suicidal episodes because it added meaning into my life. And oftentimes I wonder, you know, did that really help me? And you know, it actually did. It definitely did. But more people are willing to applaud that action of mine than encounter the burdensome feelings underneath it. We're not allowed to philosophically question the mandate to continue life, but we are allowed to continue being miserable and make a showcase of it. I naturally find myself trailing in the paths of great philosophical thinkers because I have these big questions on life that cannot be answered by a simple social media exchange. And many times I've been denounced in my tortured ways and reduced to clinical diagnostic understandings without being able to really sit in what my emotions are saying. I'm always, this is my sort of second nature now. Like, I'm always trying to band-aid my emotions. I'm trying to make a soliloquy of them. We regulate and we correct ourselves. We modify our emotions in real time. Mental states that are deemed as undesirable are not only clinically managed, but they're morally disciplined. And my despair is no longer a neutral stance. It's, you know, a philosophical indictment. It's a medical diagnosis. And it's a banishment to the edge of society. Because obviously the mainstream world can't tolerate this line of questioning. Because if we change what is meaningful, the entire system collapses. I think there's a lot of language missing from the way that we describe our emotional worlds. And many people don't know how to connect it to the larger systems we exist in. But that's what this podcast is for. That's what my writing is for. And I hope that I can continue living just so that I can share these interdisciplinary ways of making the microcosm into the cosmic expansion of what life really is. Or it's restoring it to the cosmic expansion of what life really is. Everything is of depth to me. And I talk about these things not because I discount the human, but because I have a full reverence for what it means to be human. And I think I am in abhorrence for humans most of the time because of the way they treat themselves. If you don't respect yourself, how can I respect you? And then by relation, how can I respect myself? Because I, in many ways, am of the same family that you belong to. And if the family is so broken, what does that say about me? And what am I doing here to fix that? Thank you so much for being here, for listening in today. I hope that today's episode gave you things to think about. I'm not trying to promote self-destruction or suicide in any way. I just think we would be doing ourselves a favor by bringing these topics into light and out of the shadows. I'm not interested in shallow affirmation or false healing language or moral blackmail around suffering. I am more so attached to speaking a language that can hold despair, lucidity, autonomy, and critique without instantly collapsing into pathology or sentimentality. That is the real thesis of today's episode. If you would like to learn from me in more rigorous setting, I have offerings listed on my page. I would love to work with you. If there is alignment, you can book a discovery call with me. We can see where it goes. Otherwise, feel free to subscribe to my Substack, The Simply Human Collective. You can follow my TikTok, Spiritual Sentience, subscribe to my YouTube, and I'd love to welcome you back to this podcast and wherever you listen to podcasts the next time I upload. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you, and I am excited for future episodes. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and let me know what all of this made you think about. I'd love to hear your own inquiries and your own reflections. All right, take care of yourselves, and take some time to sit with your own emotions today. Yeah. All right. Thank you for listening.